Hey guys, Marcin here bringing a Dragon Ball Z Dokkan Battle video, and so today we are going to be talking about LR, Vegeta and Trunks again. The question is, of course, is there a chance that these guys are still going to EZA during this celebration? Now, there has been a lot of negative response, I guess you could say, to the fact that we received the EZA for Int LR Fusion Zamasu and not the EZA for these guys. Most of us, myself included, expected both of these to release at the same time. Because of course these guys released as part of the Tanabata celebration in 2022. But of course the format of the Tanabata celebration always was, and of course probably still will be when we get the new renamed version that should be coming in September, that part 1 was a Dokkan Fest exclusive LR, which of course was the Vegeta and Trunks, and then part 2 is a, well, it was Yellow Coin LR when they first started, right? And then obviously with the last one being the Omega became a Carnival LR, but a non-Dokkan Fest exclusive LR that released a little bit later on. As you can see, 21st of July in Japan when like the Tanabata first came out, and these guys came out on the 30th of June, so it's like 3 weeks later. Fusion Zamasu came out as the part 2 LR for the 2022 Tanabata celebration. So it's very interesting that they've chosen to go down this route where they've EZA'd Fusion Zamasu first, even though Vegeta and Trunks came out first as part of that celebration. It would have made perfect sense for them to just do both of them at the same time, or you could argue it would make sense to do Vegeta and Trunks first and then do Zamasu later. Like, even in the same celebration, maybe if Vegeta and Trunks had been a bit earlier and then Fusion Zamasu had come out like when he did, or was coming out like the beginning of this coming week, for example. But instead, they just released the Fusion Zamasu one first, which is interesting because I guess on the one hand, the Rose team overall just being super bosses is definitely weaker than the Goku and Vegeta team. Obviously the Goku and Vegeta team having the 10-year fusions, the 7 years, like basically any fused fighter, like his team's really, really good right from the jump. But like the team could still really do with a really, really good slot 1 unit outside of just running both the Gokus, right? And especially if you're someone who hasn't pulled the Goku and Vegeta, having these guys on the team as another asset to be in slot 1 would definitely be very, very appropriate and good for the team. So the question is there still a chance that we get these guys EZA? And I think the answer is yes. But there are a couple of different possibilities. Now, this is obviously being recorded, we are Saturday the 19th of July. From everything we know from the clues in-game, I mentioned this in a video yesterday, we should be expecting part 2 to start on the 24th, which is next Thursday. But so far we haven't had any teasers or hints or clues or anything like that. Obviously we wouldn't get like the full reveal or the full details until at the earliest like 48 hours before, which would be Tuesday the 22nd. If they were going to do a stream or anything like that, it would, chances are, it would only be the literal day before, potentially even like hours before, depending on how they wanted to plan it out, right? So we still have this period between now and the start of next week, Thursday being the big day, to see some kind of thing to be the end of part 1. Because a lot of the times the way the schedule works out for these drops is that we'll get some news on Twitter on what is a Sunday morning for me. I know Saturday evening for you guys if you're in the US, but we get news on Twitter on the Sunday morning, then we get a data download on Monday, and then that thing comes out in the game on Tuesday. Now, that means that there is a possibility, and it might be very slim, we might be coping a little bit here, but there is a possibility that tomorrow morning on Twitter, and I will be live, so if you're around at the time news normally drops, come check out the stream, because if it happens, we'll see it live. They will tweet out the EZA details for Vegeta and Trunks, and then that EZA will drop on Tuesday, and then part 2 just starts on Thursday. Now, I don't know, I was looking back at the timeline, but unfortunately the wiki kind of stopped being updated in terms of the timeline anniversary-wise from like the 8th anniversary, but it's not usual that they release something, even if it is just an EZA, it's not usual that they release another piece of content like 2 days before the next part starts. So I do think that whilst it is possible, it's certainly a more slim chance, right? Because at the end of the day, anything is possible in Dokkan, right? Like I've said many times, even with this celebration, the day before they posted that teaser that had the Zamasu voice line at the end, like everyone was like 99% convinced that it was Daima because of all the other clues and everything, right? So anything is always possible. I don't think, if you can remember a time, if there is an instance where they've done that in the past and I don't remember, do let me know down below in the comment section. But I'm not sure if we've ever gotten like an EZA 2 days before like part 2 or part 3 or EX or anything like that. Big next part of a celebration starts. So whilst it's a possibility, I do think it's very slim. Now I've seen people say, you know, what if they EZA in part 3 or even like an EX part? Which is interesting to think about because obviously part 2 of the celebration, although we don't know like the overall theme, we know that we're getting a new Omega Shenron, right? As the Dokkan Fest LR, or at least I say we know. Again, we're like 99% certain because of that leak with the LR Omega art. It could still turn out to be something for something else, who knows? But it seems like it's going to be Dokkan Fest LR Omega Shenron. And then the Carnival LR, we still have no idea. Standalone Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, Tag Super Saiyan 4s, could be something like that. But that means that we're kind of leaning towards part 2 being more themed around GT, where part 1 has been almost entirely themed around Future. Even with Rose leading super bosses, right? We haven't gotten a different random super boss EZA or new unit. They've all been Future Saga related, which means that the part 2 stuff is very likely to all be GT related. We know we have a bunch of upcoming GT EZAs like the Int Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, which obviously goes hand in hand with if the Carnival LR is a Super Saiyan 4, whether it's the tag units, whether it's full power Goku. I would still love to see a Dokkan original, like what if full power Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta instead. Imagine that, where he has the intro with like the full power ritual, but it's for Vegeta instead of Goku. That'd be pretty cool. Obviously the part 2 Carnival, as I already said, could be a standalone Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta, which would be a little bit annoying because we'd be in that situation again where the unit gets an EZA that has the same name as the main unit, and so ends up just having to be a slot 3 floater, or if, you know, if the new Gogeta is not a slot 1 unit, then it makes it really awkward to run them together. And then there's like Tech Super 17, there's a couple of other like Super EZAs like the Omega, there's a bunch of old GT EZAs as well. There's even things like the Super, I forgot to mention these guys in my like who will EZA in part 2 video, but the second year Super Saiyan 4s, I feel like these guys could be like the big surprise at the end of the part, like they get a Super EZA, because they would be the first 120 lead units to get a Super EZA, but they were the first 120 lead units and they were for the 2nd anniversary, so that would be quite interesting, because obviously for Global this is around the time of the year that they came out, 8 years ago, which is crazy. So these guys could get a Super EZA. So it doesn't make a lot of sense for part 2. The only link that really exists is the fact that these guys are all on the Battle of Fate category. Like all the characters from the Omega fight, like there's Omega, there's like the Super Saiyan 4s, Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta obviously down here, and then yeah, we have Trunks and Vegeta, but it seems way more likely that we're going to be themed solely around GT. Now that does bring up the possibility that maybe in part 3, if there is one, or just an EX part, if they give us some kind of bonus, then it could be any other characters from GT and Future Saga, just to kind of wrap up some of the stuff that they didn't do. So for example, I could see them doing part 2's like GT, mostly themed. We get this guy, we get Super 17, we get the STR Omega Shenron Super EZA, similar sort of number of EZAs that we've gotten in this part so far. And then for part 3, it's only like a small part, like an EX part, but that's when they then drop a couple of big hitters like the Super EZAs for these two, and then the EZA for these guys. So we finish up the celebration getting more major buffs for the teams from both parts of the celebration, essentially. Now, that's definitely not the ideal way. That's not the way I would have done it. That's not the way I would be happy with them having done it. But at the end of the day, I guess, as long as these guys do EZA by the end of the celebration, then I suppose I'll be happy, because as I say a lot of the time when we talk about new teams and new celebration like builds and everything, the idea should be that by the end of the celebration, the categories or the teams that were the focus of that celebration should now be top tier, like runnable teams. And obviously the Goku and Vegeta team is, but having this unit get his EZA makes that team significantly better, and them not getting their EZA in this celebration doesn't make a huge amount of sense considering that we easy 8 this guy and he was their part 2 LR. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense for this celebration to end without these guys getting an easy A. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. The other thing that I wanted to point out as well is we've got the Goku Vegeta card. I don't know why the wiki never loads the art for this, but when we look at the Vegeta part of the card, much like the Rosé, this guy buffs characters on the team who have a certain unit name, right? And his is character for the character because it includes himself, and allies whose name include Trunks. But there are basically no meta relevant Trunkses, and we haven't gotten a new Trunks in this celebration. So like this part of the passive almost seemed straight away from when we got the details like a huge clue that Trunks and Vegeta were going to easy A, because then not only can they go in slot 1 and then this guy can go in slot 2, but then he's giving them a massive buff by being in the Vegeta exchanged form. And of course the fact that they were featured on the banner, which, I mean, obviously banners feature old units, and those old units are usually relative to the theme, so it's not like, you know, it doesn't make any sense for them to be on the banner, but them being on the banner was another big sort of clue that they should get an easy A, and it has yet to materialize. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. I mean, there are literally a couple of options, which is we get this easy A in the next couple of days, which means if anything we'll see information about it tomorrow. The second option is we get the easy A in part 2, which doesn't make a lot of sense if we're just going to get, like I assume we're just going to get a bunch of GT stuff. Third opportunity or option is we get the easy A as like part 3 or the EX, and they just drop some easy A's that are both future and GT related to help buff both of those teams a little bit more as the celebration comes to an end. Or option 4, of course, is that they just don't get an easy A during this celebration. And then the most confusing part about that is that then, like, when do they get an easy A in the future? Now I guess, you know, the next time we get like a new Trunks or a new Vegeta that potentially leads Vegeta family, they could easy A in that celebration, I guess, but it really doesn't make a huge amount of sense for them to not easy A in this celebration, especially with them giving this guy his easy A already. So to answer the ultimate question of the video, I think yes, there is still hope that these guys will easy A during the celebration. However, if it's not going to be in the next couple of days, I think potentially it is going to end up being a part 3 or EX part kind of thing, which means we won't see this for another couple of weeks. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. What do you think is going to happen with these guys? What is your most preferable outcome? Will you be okay with them getting an easy, as long as it's by the end of the celebration, even if it's in part 3? Is that good enough for you? Or would you still be disappointed? Let me know all of your thoughts down below in the comment section. And yeah, I'll be live tomorrow when the normal time we would expect news on a Sunday. So hopefully we will see something then, and maybe I will see you guys there. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Master Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the links down below, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.